History books love the flashy presidents, the war heroes, the speech makers, the legends carved into stone. But today, we're talking about the leaders who nearly broke America. Bad decisions, worse timing, and consequences that still echo today. These are the presidents who didn't just fail, they changed history for the worse. These are the worst presidents in American history. When people argue about the worst presidents in U.S. history, names fly around fast. But some disasters don't come from evil intentions. They come from arrogance, ignorance, or simply walking away at the wrong moment. Let's start with Benjamin Harrison, a man so forgettable that if you showed his portrait to a room full of Americans, most would assume he starred in a silent movie. But behind that quiet image was a ticking economic time bomb. In 1890, Harrison approved the McKinley Tariff, pushing import taxes to nearly 50%. On paper, it was meant to protect American businesses. In reality, it crushed consumers. Prices surged, foreign trade evaporated, and farmers, already struggling, were financially suffocated. To make matters worse, Harrison burned through the nation's surplus like it was monopoly money. Then came the real trick. The economic collapse didn't fully explode until after he left office. When the Panic of 1893 wrecked the economy, Harrison was already gone, relaxing back home, while the next president inherited the wreckage. No crime, no scandal, just a slow-motion disaster and a quiet exit. But economic mismanagement pales compared to Millard Fillmore, a man who thought compromise meant forcing citizens into moral bankruptcy. In 1850, America was tearing itself apart over slavery. Desperate to calm tensions, Fillmore signed the Fugitive Slave Act, a law that turned every citizen into a potential slave catcher. Helping an escaped slave, even offering food or shelter, became a federal crime. Free states didn't matter. Instead of preserving unity, the law shocked ordinary Americans. People who had never taken a side suddenly realized the government was forcing them to participate in cruelty. Abolitionist movements exploded overnight. What was meant to calm the fire only poured gasoline on it. Then comes William Henry Harrison, whose presidency barely lasted longer than a free trial subscription. Eager to prove his strength, the 68-year-old president delivered the longest inauguration speech in history, nearly 2 hours, in freezing weather, without a coat or hat. Within weeks, he was gravely ill. 1 month later, he was dead. He signed no laws, made no policies, but his sudden death triggered confusion so severe that no one even knew who was legally in charge. The next president didn't just stumble, he lit the fuse on a civil war. If America was standing on a fault line, Franklin Pierce jumped up and down on it. Handsome, charming, and smooth-talking, Pierce entered office promising unity during a time when slavery was ripping the nation apart. Instead, he made one catastrophic decision that pushed the country closer to bloodshed than ever before. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 opened vast new territories and allowed settlers to vote on whether slavery would be legal. Sounds democratic, right? But this single move shattered the long-standing Missouri Compromise, which had kept a fragile balance for decades. The result was chaos.
Get the children to the river! Hurry, run!
Pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups flooded Kansas armed with rifles, hatred, and revenge. Elections were rigged, homes were burned, families were murdered. The territory descended into a 5-year nightmare known as Bleeding Kansas. So what did President Pierce do? Nothing meaningful. Worse, he openly supported the pro-slavery faction, even when their government was formed through violence and fraud. Federal troops were sent not to restore peace, but to prop up illegitimate power. Instead of cooling tensions, Pierce accelerated the countdown to civil war. But internal chaos wasn't the only way presidents failed America. Enter Woodrow Wilson, a man praised for global vision, but remembered for crushing freedoms at home. During World War I, Wilson signed the Espionage and Sedition Acts, making it a crime to criticize the government, the military, or even the flag. Journalists were arrested, union leaders jailed, ordinary citizens silenced. Free speech, the backbone of democracy, was sacrificed in the name of wartime fear. And yet Wilson believed history would vindicate him. After the war, he pushed hard for the League of Nations, hoping to prevent future global conflicts. But the U.S. Senate rejected it, fearing endless foreign entanglements. The League went forward anyway, just without America. Wilson's dream collapsed, leaving him politically isolated and furious. Even worse, the Treaty of Versailles, which he supported, punished Germany so harshly that it planted the seeds for World War II. Wilson wanted to reshape the world. Instead, he fractured it. George W. Bush entered the presidency during calm waters. That calm ended on September 11, 2001. In the immediate aftermath of the attacks, Bush united the nation. Flags flew. Americans stood shoulder to shoulder. For a brief moment, the country felt unbreakable. Then came the decisions that reshaped the modern world. The invasion of Iraq was justified by intelligence claiming Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. He didn't. But by the time the truth surfaced, the U.S. was locked into a trillion-dollar war that cost thousands of American lives and destabilized an entire region for generations. At home, fear became policy. The Patriot Act, passed in record time, expanded government surveillance powers beyond anything previously imaginable. Agencies could monitor citizens without warrants. Phone calls, emails, and private data suddenly felt less private. Many argued it was necessary, but those powers never fully went away. Then came Hurricane Katrina. As New Orleans flooded and citizens begged for help from rooftops, the federal response was slow, disorganized, and painfully detached. Thousands were herded into the Superdome, a shelter with no power, broken plumbing, and dwindling supplies. Images of suffering flooded television screens worldwide. Bush became the face of government failure, not because of cruelty, but because of distance. And long before Bush, America faced another leader whose indifference shaped generations. After Lincoln's assassination, the nation needed healing. What it got was Andrew Johnson. A former slaveholder, Johnson vetoed civil rights protections for newly freed Black Americans. Congress overruled him, but Johnson fought back by restoring power to former Confederates through mass pardons. The result? Jim Crow laws, the rise of the KKK, a century of racial injustice. Johnson wasn't just impeached. He nearly erased the victory of the Civil War itself. When Herbert Hoover took office, optimism was high. He promised prosperity, stability, and growth. Then the stock market crashed. As banks collapsed and unemployment soared to 25%, Hoover refused aggressive government intervention. He believed aid would weaken self-reliance. So Americans waited and waited while breadlines grew longer. The breaking point came in 1932. 15,000 World War I veterans marched peacefully on Washington, demanding early payment of bonuses they were promised. Money they desperately needed to survive. They built camps. They protested quietly. Hoover's response? He sent the army. Tanks rolled through American streets. Tear gas filled the air. Veterans were beaten and driven out by force. Photographs of wounded soldiers shocked the nation. Hoover's presidency was over, long before the election. And before him stood James Buchanan, a man who watched America tear itself apart and chose silence. As Southern states began seceding, Buchanan claimed secession was illegal, but also insisted the government had no power to stop it. By the time he left office, the Civil War was inevitable. Leadership isn't just about action. Sometimes it's about refusing to look away. Buchanan looked away. Warren G. Harding knew he wasn't ready for the presidency. He admitted it privately. Unfortunately, America learned it publicly. Harding surrounded himself with friends, poker buddies, and political cronies known as the Ohio Gang. They treated the federal government like a personal bank vault. The Teapot Dome scandal exposed secret oil deals for bribes. The Veterans Bureau was looted of millions meant for wounded soldiers. And Harding? He golfed, he gambled, he drank illegally, he cheated on his wife. In 1923, before the scandals fully unraveled, Harding died suddenly of a heart attack. America was left stunned by the rot beneath the surface. Trust in government shattered. And maybe that was the lasting lesson.
In now. If this information helped you learn something important,
then subscribe to the channel, like this video.
Others, and share it with others who value history.